gentlemen, this is Sumaira Isaacs from Toronto. I have absolute pleasure today to introduce Mr. Kairat. He's the Vice Chairman of the Board for the Kazakh Tourism National Company. Welcome to our show.
Good morning, Sumaira. Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you. And I know that you are right now in a restaurant, and so there is some background noise, and we will just ignore that and just carry on with the interview today. Okay. All right. Okay. So given the economic implications of the COVID-19, there has been a sharp reduction in oil and gas prices, and the Kazakhstan economy has been hit and impacted. And there's been a lockdown situation. There's been some easing of quarantine measures, and gradual revival of business activity across the country has started taking place. What's the outlook for tourism and hospitality moving forwards? How is your country responding to the current situation?
Okay, well, tourism, just like anywhere else in the world, was hit the hardest, and of course, the country was not ready for this kind of implications that were brought by COVID and by the oil prices plunge, as you mentioned. But we're optimistic. First of all, reviving the domestic tourism. Right now, we have opened up most of the hotel properties, and we've significantly lifted the barriers for hotels. In the beginning, when we opened up a couple of days ago, we had very strict measures as to have a negative test result on COVID for all the visitors. Then keeping the distance and in the public areas of hotels, and then trying to cut on buffet styles in restaurants and so on. Right now, after we've spoken to businesses, to the industry associations, hoteliers, and so on, we've decided to be less strict on that one, as hotels, as the industry is more prepared than restaurants or bungalow or smaller type of enterprises, just because keeping standards is not something new for them. So the outlook for domestic tourism is quite strong. We have done a couple of surveys. We have run different quizzes, gamification surveys, and so on, to see if people are still willing to travel. And we see very, very good findings that people are willing to travel as soon as the transportation is open between the provinces. So our national carrier, along with our other carriers, is already operating several destinations out of Nur-Sultan and Almaty, another biggest city in Kazakhstan. So the trains will start, and the intercity train connection, the bus connections will start too. So we're very positive for domestic. In terms of inbound, it's still unclear, as we are not sure of the quarantine measures for the incoming traffic. Of course, the citizens of Kazakhstan returning home after being stranded for a couple of months, they will be subject to a very, very short quarantine, up to maybe 2-3 nights, and after testing negative, they will be released to their homes. But for visitors, unfortunately, it's still unclear how they will be treated. But I guess we have to wait until July or August to see when this quarantine requirement will be totally lifted.
Okay, so the retail and hospitality sector is in a bit of a slowdown and difficult situation, like anywhere else in the world. Okay, but the state has come to support here. Are there any incentives being launched by the government? Any waivers? Any financial support for the tourism industry in general?
We have introduced mostly tax reliefs to the businesses. We had we had differentiated different levels of businesses, such as SMEs and larger businesses. Some of the brand bigger hotel properties, of course, they fell under big businesses, and most of the properties were still under SMEs, receiving tax relief, such as property tax relief until end of the year. It's payroll tax relief until end of the year. Of course, different types of tax holidays were different based on the size of the enterprise. But overall, what we can say that we had a positive response from the industry praising these measures, but at the same time asking for additional help, maybe for larger businesses also to have tax reliefs extended until end of the year, or maybe introducing such measures as holidays or suspension on repayment of loans.
Okay.
For bigger enterprises, those who used even low interest loans from the government, there's still significant robust payments, monthly payments, quarterly payments. So we're asking additional help from the government. In few days, we will have a big conference with the participation of the Vice Minister of Economics and the National Chamber of Entrepreneurs that is uniting all the businesses, including hospitality sector. We'll be speaking of additional measures, such as introducing a so-called solidarity fund.
Solidarity.
Of course,
okay.
Solidarity fund whereby properties.
Is it only focused on tourism, or is the economy in general?
For tourism only, specifically for hospitality sector, for hotel properties, whereby hotels will be paying something similar to bed tax. And by the way, we don't have any formal bed tax introduced so far, no city taxes on top of just the VAT that is imposed on travelers. So the properties have come up with the initiative to kind of start collecting money for such a day in the future, and in the anticipation of the second round of pandemic, if that happens, God forbid, the hotels might be ready next year or in the future anytime. They have some money collected for marketing initiatives to roll out quickly without government approval, to help with additional grants or support of employees that were really hit hard during these times. Because
I'm really interested in this because this is a new model. I've not heard of it before. So this is actually a fund that has been created by the government, or is it by the industry?
It's a pure industry initiative.
It's a pure okay.
Correct. As a result of what we have experienced over the past 3 months, and after carrying out different industry meetings, we see some initiative from the hoteliers to introduce this kind of fee that will be then directed towards some sort of a fund. The custodian of this fund could be a joint
so who pays?
entity.
Is this like something that who will pay for that? It's the consumer. It's the guests who will pay. It's a service fee. It's almost
correct.
Like
it's something similar to service charge, but I would say it's a combination of a bed tax and a service charge imposed by the hotels.
How much are you?
We're talking about a very small amount, a fraction of a room night rate of something around $2.5 to $3 per night at 5-star properties.
Okay. Okay.
Prorated based on the hotel stars and occupancy, room availability, and so on.
Is that alone enough? You know, that contribution alone is enough to safeguard the industry? Will the government contribute towards such a fund as well in the future, or it will remain purely on the industry level?
The government will still be contributing as a general contribution to all type of industries, okay, and to all citizens who remain jobless during these times. So this is something separate, carried out purely by the industry, but in conjunction with the quasi-government sector, in this case, just like Kazakh Tourism, the entity that belongs to the government, but in a very close contact with the industry, trying to come up with I would say, creative initiatives to get out of crisis next time.
Okay, that's very interesting. So tell me, what is the situation on the flights at the moment? I know the borders are still closed to many countries, and so where will the focus be? Is it domestic or regional? Do you see some kind of bubbles being created with some of the regional countries? How do you foresee?
We really like the idea of safety bubbles. And right now we're looking, of course, at neighboring countries. Unfortunately, we see a lot of cases, significantly more than in our case in neighboring Russia. However, in the remaining Central Asian states such as Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, we see very low day-to-day new cases, which gives us a good sign that some sort of bubbles can be created between our countries. However, this hasn't been discussed in details yet with our neighbors. But from what we see, neighboring Uzbekistan is going to open up to other international countries, and that makes it a bit difficult when two participants of a bubble open up to third-party countries, and that way it's a little difficult to coordinate depending on which third-party countries they open up to, what the situation of COVID is there. So I'd say during this time round, I don't see a chance of a very quick launching of a safety bubble, but maybe for the second round we should be able to implement this, and that leads to my next point, that governments across the world should come up with sort of emergency protocol, action plan, call it a crisis management plan, specifically for tourism.
Right. That was my next question as well, that has something like that been done in Kazakhstan? Because I've been talking to a few governments, and there's a very good example. In Singapore was one of the first ones to come up with SG Clean, and Azerbaijan has come up with a program called Sarhan. So it's a badge of peace of mind for the consumers, for the tourists. That like an insignia. So do you have plans to roll out something similar?
Yes, there should definitely be a crisis management plan specifically for tourism. From what we see, there were a lot of barriers introduced in order to stop the spread out, and we see very positive outcomes of this. And of course, we were able to mitigate the spread out, and thus use that time to build our muscles in terms of medical response, building additional hospitals and so on, carrying out overnight tests. Just for example, in the beginning of the pandemic, we had a capacity of only 1,000 tests overnight. So we were able to grow that capacity to 20,000 tests overnight. So maybe those measures were really helpful, and however, what we can see that some of the provinces were hit less than the capital, than biggest cities. We see that planes, of course, flight connectivities were canceled, banned, train transportation, all other types of commute. However, driving in the car, completely isolated for a family of 2 or 3, was pretty safe. We can state this now after 2-3 months, looking backwards, and maybe the protocol should envisage some sort of relief or lift for this kind of safe travel. Okay. Maybe people can go outside of bigger cities to remote areas, resort areas, and stay in this spas and hotels, smaller ones, and really obeying and adhering to all these strict sanitary protocols, but being away and still traveling.
Okay, but are you planning, or at what stage are you of devising such protocols? Is that being still considered, or they are being launched, or at what stage of readiness are you with these protocols?
we're still at a nascent stage where this is still being considered, and I think with this plan we should be able to roll out only during the next round of the pandemic if that happens in the future. So this time round was more like a test to challenge our infrastructure, our readiness. But the good thing that the population, people, they were drilled to be isolated. They were drilled and experience how to abstain themselves.
So the
So
general
next time it will be easier.
Yeah, general
Correct.
population is
Correct.
cooperating. Okay, okay. So, but a lot of your European counterparts, they are beginning to open up. From 1st June, quite a few countries have relaxed, their protocols and so forth, and there is some level of travel as well. Do you see the return of the European travelers anytime soon?
Well, to be honest, we don't see the traveler return by end of the year.
End of the
But
year.
end of the year. But to be completely realistic, I think we should look at the next year's summertime, high season time, because Kazakhstan is not a winter destination.
Yeah.
And of course, seeing people return. Of course, we do have ski winter tourism, but we looking at the historic figures, we don't see big flocks of tourists coming during that year. So to be completely realistic, we should aim at 2021.
So, there is a silver lining to every crisis. What is Kazakhstan's silver lining here?
Sorry,
out of every crisis, there's an opportunity. And do you see an opportunity here to improve your product, to build, to fine-tune some of your activities around health and safety and so forth? So,
sure. Well, first of all, I think we should all regard the current situation as a new normality, and we should be able to definitely adjust. And we already see market adjustment. For instance, looking at what was happening with the hotel industry, we made a survey and found out that less than 50% of hoteliers remained operating in one way or another, offering food delivery, offering laundry, dry cleaning services, turning their property into temporary hospitals, and so on.
Right.
So I think product adjustment is a new opportunity for businesses to be able to deploy immediately into a hospital, or to deploy more dry cleaning or food delivery services, and so on. So I think that's the opportunity. Another opportunity is, of course, it's most of the time it's in branding and marketing.
Right.
With all this new equipment that is in place, with the uniform, masks, and so on, we already see different masks popping up in different places, or even in Instagram, branded with a destination and so on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the safety narrative is very important, very topical. I think people will be rolling out marketing campaigns around being safe. And in Kazakhstan, we do have plans to highlight that we are one of the most densely populated countries. So social distancing in Kazakhstan is something natural, because you have only 6 people per square kilometer, with only 18.5 million people dwelling on the...
Your USP, that's a selling point nowadays.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a good selling idea. So, any particular message you have for the world today? That once it does get to the new normal, why Kazakhstan? What is it that is unique about your destination that people should consider in the new normal?
In the new normal, Kazakhstan was, well, I would say until March of this year, Kazakhstan was always promoted as a country of 4E, what we call the concept of Kazakh tourism. 4E. First E is eco, second is ethnic, entertainment, and events. Now, of course, with entertainment and events, it's becoming more difficult. But eco and ethnic still remains on top of our agenda, with 13 national parks, really untouched and isolated nature, I should say, being in the nature, being in the communities that work on tourism, CBTs. It's something to be away from others. Once again, with only 18.5 million people dwelling on the territory of the size of 5 Frances, for instance, and it's one of the USPs that we're going to use to be healed by nature.
Right, right. Okay, that's fantastic. That's I wanted to hear about those 4 E's, you know, because I've heard those in some of your previous interviews as well. I checked you out. So fantastic. Mr. Kairat, it's been lovely speaking to you. We really, really wish you the very best. You know, I really believe that today, I've been saying that over and over again, that yes, the world needs a vaccine, but the world also needs the glue of tourism to hold it together. And that's
Absolutely.
actually today's, for our health, mental health, because as human beings, we need to connect, we need to travel, we need to explore. That's our basic instinct. So on that note, I say thank you to you, and thank you for joining our platform.
My pleasure.
It's been an absolute pleasure from here in Toronto to talk to you in Nur Sultan.
Thank you, Sumaira. Thank you. It's my pleasure.